In his book, Postlude to the Adam and Eve Story, cataclysm scientist Chan Thomas based his reset hypothesis on the works of Royal Society Jesuit Freemason Hannes Alfvén and his theory of magneto-hydrodynamic energy. Alfvén himself experimented with liquid mercury hooked up to electric eddy currents to induce an electromagnetic field in the mercury, causing the liquid mercury to act as a near-solid plastic instead once the electromagnetic field was introduced. Alfvén himself was expanding on the works of James Clerk Maxwell, as the Beatles sang, "Bang bang Maxwell's silver mercury hammer came down on your head and made sure you were dead." Alfvén proposed that our galaxy contained a large-scale magnetic field and that charged particles moved in spiral orbits within it, plasma carrying the electric currents which create the magnetic field. Thomas proposed that these electromagnetic space currents turn the Earth's mantle into a near-solid plastic rather than liquid by interacting with the Earth's magnetic field via its north and south magnetic poles. The same as eddy currents had turned liquid mercury into a near-solid plastic in Alfvén's experiments. And that this not-quite-solid plastic mantle, forget superglue, is the reason why centrifugal force does not constantly throw our continents around our planet at such incredible force and speeds, despite allegedly spinning around at 1,000 miles per hour while corkscrewing wildly around a sun, dragging us more than 60,000 miles per hour around a galaxy, dragging us around a universe at millions of miles per hour. Because the near plastic mantle holds us in place against these unfathomable forces. But wait, it gets even more unbelievable. Every so many thousands of years on this galactic lap, we hit a patch of space with a magnetic null or reversal zone that weakens our normally stable electromagnetic eddy currents, which allows our semi-plastic mantle to return to a liquid floating state, and this sends our continents sliding and drifting all over the planet in a matter of hours until Earth finds a new equilibrium point of balance. Apparently, the ice-covered polar continents are so much more heavy than the much larger mountain-covered continents that they slide even more over the now liquid mantle from the incredible weight of frozen water on them, with centrifugal force sending them to the equator. As the continents shift and slosh about, moving from north to south or vice versa, they now encounter the 1,000-mile-per-hour winds still going from the Earth's rotation, which kicks up the ionic windstorms, fires, tsunamis, mountain ranges rising in a matter of seconds from tectonic plate crashes that no living soul on Earth could possibly survive, so help them God. This is the theory of the spaceball cataclysm. There is obviously no explanation as to why there are thousands of years of magnetic stability on this galactic lap, and then only one day of chaos, only to return to a stabilized eddy current field, if even reversed like a magnetic pole shift. But is there any geological or scientific evidence to support such a whopper of a theory? Well, yes and no, depending on if the evidence was cherry-picked to prove this theory, or if this theory was based on no other plausible possibilities to explain the evidence. Physics is mathematical not because we know so much about the physical world, but because we know so little. The Beresovka mammoth was found frozen in Siberia with fresh preserved buttercups still in his mouth and stomach. Professionals from the meatpacking industry correctly agreed that the temperature had to have dropped dozens of degrees instantly for his massive body and even the fresh buttercups to have frozen through consistently and evenly without tissue rot or damage. However, the assumption was made that he must have been in a warmer place that suddenly slid into the current location of Siberia on the globe model, and that's why he froze instantly. But they failed to notice he was a fully furred woolly mammoth, already evolved for living in freezing cold regions, or to explain how his body survived the hypersonic winds and tidal waves that would accompany an instantaneous continental plate slide, easily crushing mountains, but not him. The coral reef on the Arctic floor assumes that it must have moved there, but what if it was once actually warm there? As shown on dozens of maps predating the 1600s Maunder Grand Solar Minimum. There is undeniable evidence of major water-based geological changes in sea level, rock stratification, and sudden ice ages, and we recommend that you read Chan Thomas's Adam and Eve story for greater detail on these things. But what about the Lichtenberg scorches all over the Earth, or the billions of thriving species alive today who couldn't possibly have survived such devastating events, or the many native and biblical tales of 40 days of rain? What about the thousands of ancient structures still standing, or the stories of the sun standing still, reversing direction, or going away for several days, or the sudden appearance of comets that always accompany these massive Earth changes? The CIA released a translated 1948 Russian document on the study of outer gravitational field and the shape of the physical Earth. Scientists were studying Earth physics, applied geophysics, and researching causes of sun halos and atmospheric brightness derived on the assumption of a flat Earth. Though it was made quite clear in the document that the shape of the Earth was unknown in 1948. Quite strange, considering the first globe was made in 1491, and Universal Pictures has been flashing them in our face since 1912. Then in 1961, NASA released a paper on how to calculate wind compensation for launching unguided rockets. The trajectory computations to pull this off were based on a flat, non-rotating Earth. In 1971, NASA studied getting single-stage rockets from rest to vertical and finally horizontal velocity, assuming a flat, non-rotating Earth. In 1972, NASA creates radar side-slip data technology for use where a flat, non-rotating Earth may be assumed. In 1978, NASA studies aircraft landing trajectories and variable wind fields based on the assumption that the Earth is flat and non-rotating.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen. So in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going. Money.
In 1987, NASA puts out a user manual for Linear, used for determining engine torque and thrust, flying in a stationary atmosphere over a flat, non-rotating Earth. 1988, NASA, Manual for Flight Testing a VSTOL Aircraft, describes the kinetics of the craft's motion over a flat, non-rotating Earth. 1991, NASA Aircraft Model for the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics discusses equations of motion and atmospheric model for flying in a stationary atmosphere over a flat, non-rotating Earth. The 1997 NASA document on predicted thrust performance for the SR-71 Blackbird, carrying an external payload like another aircraft on its back, discusses flying in non-turbulent atmosphere, zero side forces, and a non-rotating Earth. NASA, 1997, Singular Arc Optimal Climb Trajectory of Aircraft in a Vertical Plane on a Non-Rotating Flat Earth. In 2000, the U.S. Army Research Lab released a study on how many volume decibels of loss would happen for 3-meter antenna over ranges of 200 to 410 meters in the woods over a flat Earth. In 2001, the Army Research Lab released a paper on the propagation of electromagnetic fields over flat Earth. 2002, NASA is now back with the actual flight test results of the SR-71 Blackbird carrying a mounted aircraft over a flat, non-rotating Earth. Nothing to see here, people. Move along. 2002, Army Research Labs Laser Range Targeting System over a flat Earth. 2003, Army Research Lab User Manual for Fast Field Scanning, which works over a flat Earth and non-turbulent atmosphere. In the 2009 Army Research Lab paper on computing efficient algorithms for estimating the angle of arrival of helicopters using acoustic arrays, they admit in the paper that the actual results were not close to the anticipated results, which may be caused by a, quote, violation of the assumption of the flat Earth model, unquote. Meaning they used the spherical Earth mathematics for their predictions and it didn't even come close to the actual results. Finally, in 2010, the Army Research Lab released a paper on the trajectory effects of adding liquid payloads to spinning projectiles, admitting the equations they used for projectile flight dynamics assume a flat Earth.
So let's talk about the money, because the money gets really interesting, and if people don't understand the money, then you don't understand the lie. $56 million today, of course, you've heard that 56 million times probably this weekend. But we need to talk about how big the space economy is, okay? That is the music industry at $19.3 billion in 2018. The movie industry is $43 billion in 2018. Okay? We can even add to the movie by going with home entertainment. That includes your Blu-ray players, your DVD players, your home entertainment systems, your TVs. Even with all that, we're still at $136 billion for all of movies. That's box office, that's theaters, that's every movie made in Hollywood. Okay? That's how much that entire industry is worth. The video game industry, $137 billion, one of the biggest industries that there is. We can add those all together, combo of everything music that you've ever seen music, home entertainment, movies, box office, Hollywood, video games. That includes on your apps, on your phone, Xbox, PlayStation. That's the space industry. $410 billion. So when people ask why the lie, well, what good does it do? What difference does it make? Well, it makes a huge difference to those that are involved. NASA, the people they pay, JPL, the organizations that they deal with, all these other countries. And again, this is a worldwide economy.
Pan tam był. Czy Ziemia rzeczywiście jest kulą zawieszoną w kosmosie?
Jest płaska. Tak jak oczekują oni. Nie spodziewałem się do tego pytania, ale zapewniam pan, że jest płaska.
Generał Mirosław Hermaszewski, jak dotąd pierwszy i ostatni Polak, który odbył lot orbitalny. Dziękuję serdecznie za rozmowę.
Dzięki. Dziękuję, kłaniam się.
If it turns out that NASA, the US Army, and the burgeoning flat Earth movement's geocentric models are actually correct, rendering this magnetic galaxy lap and slipping continental plates theory impossible on a, quote, flat, non-rotating Earth, as NASA calls it, and thus Big Bang heliocentric space is really just a big business racket and a scam, then how do their models explain these cataclysms? To start with, there are dozens of theoretical flat Earth models, and this is not one of them. Neither is this.
One by one, the financial capitals of the world crumbling under the might of their business acumen. Or so it would have been, if certain modern theories concerning the shape of the world had not proved to be disastrously wrong.
Despite the numerous nuances, one of the things all of these ancient and modern models have in common is the idea that the Earth, at least the part we know of, is sealed off in some kind of enclosure or dome above us, around us, and even below us in some models. This idea is key for plasma discharge and flooding events on the flat Earth models. Some speculate that this dome or enclosure is made of an electromagnetic primer field. Others claim an actual constructed dome of iron and various gems, as the so-called meteors that fall from the enclosure are all made of. Some say it is the natural arc of energy movement. Some speculate it is an air pocket, like a giant bubble floating in infinite waters, or maybe it's a combination of all of the above. Whatever is theorized to be beyond the enclosure or firmament is up for conjecture and a fascinating subject, but for a few exceptions we'll get into, has little relevance to the point of this section of the film. Whether it's actual space, infinite water, God, heaven, another dimension, infinite magnetic field potential, or we are just a puddle in an infinite plane of ice or energy, or none of the above, I couldn't possibly tell you, and neither can NASA. Another thing most models have in common is the idea that our plane and this dome is circled and met by a great barrier made of either ice or liquefied air, for it constitutes a very good reason for the formation of the immeasurable and insurmountable ice barrier, which may one day be discovered to be liquefied air. It is a scientific fact that the icy waters of the so-called polar seas contain an immense quantity of kalimur, or potassium chloride. As this salt is chemically capable of producing great cold, we have further evidence of the possibility that the supposed ice barrier is really liquefied air. And finally, the enclosure of the whole electrical circuit beneath us, the underworld, talked about in mythologies, hell, hollow earth, the choke ring, Sheol, Hades, Abaddon, the water tables below the land and oceans. There are dozens of names and theories, and again, what may be underneath that, Rahab, Leviathan, Tehom, Rabbah, Apsu, Tiamat, the shit you just flushed down the toilet is not in the scope of this film. The last and most important thing, if the US Army and NASA are correct, and the Earth is flat and not rotating, then the only way the sun could rise in the east and set in the west every 24 hours is if it is circling the Earth and much closer than 93 million miles away. In almost all of these models, the sun and the moon are inside of this dome or enclosure, and the cymatic stars and wandering stars we call planets are attached or connected to it.
The bottom line seems to be that instead of thinking of clouds as something being a result of the climate, it actually sort of upside down. It is that the climate is a result of changes in the clouds.
What we could see was that when the magnetic activity of the sun was larger, then the temperature on the Earth was higher. Nobody had an answer to what kind of mechanism could be the cause of that.
We knew that somehow the magnetic activity on the sun had to have an influence on the Earth's climate, direct or indirect. But one day, someone stepped into my office and mentioned cosmic rays. When I heard this word cosmic rays, it made me immediately think of an experiment I did in high school where we had what is called a cloud chamber. Inside the cloud chamber, you have supersaturated air, and when a particle, for instance, a cosmic rays go through, it made a string of small droplets, like a small cloud. With this image in my head, I thought, what if cosmic rays are responsible for forming clouds? And what if the sun, with its magnetic field, is capable of changing the clouds on Earth? Then we would have a perfect explanation on how the sun would be responsible for climate through our everyday clouds that we see on the sky.
Whereas most people would think that since there's water in the atmosphere, that naturally there'll be clouds, but that isn't true. The only way that clouds can form in the atmosphere, in our atmosphere, under normal conditions, is to condense onto an aerosol or existing particle in the air. Every cloud droplet that's formed is formed on a particle initially in the air. All clouds are formed upon these aerosols. And so it's absolutely crucial to understand how these particles come about and what their properties are. Otherwise, we can't ever hope to understand clouds and their behavior.
And that's where cosmic rays actually might come in. Because what do cosmic rays do when they enter the Earth's atmosphere? They produce small ions. It is the belief that these small charges help forming these small specks or aerosols in the Earth's atmosphere.
If you decrease the amount of low clouds, it will be more heating down the ground. And in particular now this new work that they show that it's only the low clouds that changes. There's still a mechanism to explain this that's missing.
There's a fairly large fraction of low clouds. A large part are responsible for a large part of the cooling caused by these clouds. The reason low clouds are so important is that they actually reflect a lot of the sunlight back into space. I mean, we know them when we travel in airplanes. These are these monotonic scenes that we see over the oceans. And they are white because they are reflecting the sunlight back into space. And you can imagine if you change the amount of low clouds, you change the amount of energy that the surface gets. That means that low clouds have a strong cooling effect on the Earth's climate. So if we have more low clouds, climate will become colder. And if we have fewer cosmic rays, we have fewer low clouds, and the Earth becomes warmer.
So the idea is that cosmic rays from exploding stars trillions of miles away bombard the Earth, ionize into aerosol particulates, and cause the lower layer of clouds in our atmosphere, which blocks out the sunlight, causes cooler temperatures, more moisture, and if enough particulates are in the air from volcanic eruptions or any change in the atmospheric composition due to these cosmic ray aerosols, we obviously get more rain, snow, flooding, etc. However, the magnetic solar winds during solar maximum periods, where the sun's magnetic field is stronger, push these cosmic rays away from the Earth, so we get fewer low cloud formations and warmer climate. Even though the Earth's own alleged local magnetic field somehow fails to do the exact same thing. Put in perspective, imagine a man in India lighting a bonfire and a woman in Alaska's toe getting hot from it. But hang on, what are cosmic rays? Cosmic rays are charged particles created outside the solar system. Why do we call them rays then? The reason is that the detection of cosmic rays started even before we could envision what they really are. You can't make this shit up. Well, obviously you can, but it gets better. They were initially thought to be some sort of electromagnetic radiation, made up of photons, or as gamma rays are. With the first measurements made in 1912 by Victor Hess, the Nazi Fuel Society Nobel Prize winner, with a balloon, we learned that a radiation of a very great penetrating power enters our atmosphere from above, which excluded the sun as its source, obviously. But if NASA, the US Army, and those crazy flat earthers are right, and the sun is local inside our enclosure, and cosmic radiation is just as it was earlier thought, just electromagnetic radiation from the plasma ether and Earth's local toroidal dynamo field, then this all starts to make a hell of a lot more sense. The higher up we go in an airplane or Mount Everest, the colder it gets. But we're told go way up to the thermosphere, and the solar radiation makes that atmosphere layer 2,000 degrees Celsius, almost double the melting point of steel. Right where the steel space station and satellites are. Only there's not enough gas molecules to transfer that heat to them, only to the magic infrared thermometer they use to measure the temperature, which can only measure surface temperatures and not internal temperatures, which the thermosphere doesn't have, and which crafts with surfaces in the thermosphere don't get hot enough to measure. But I digress. But if the thermosphere really is that hot because the sun is actually up there with some enclosure trapping the heated air from rising any further, then we have a more local magnetic culprit for affecting etheric plasma in our atmosphere and low cloud formations. During natural grand solar maximum cycles, like we had from 1920 until 2000, when they tried to pin their bullshit man-made global warming carbon tax scam on us, the sun is covered in sunspots when the magnetic field is high. We've now had a few hundred days in a row without any sunspots, and 2019 was only the beginning of the modern eddy grand solar minimum, set to last until 2090. We've already had worldwide record snowfalls, record rains and flooding, freak floods in Saudi Arabia, massive hailstorms in Guadalajara and Kazakhstan. These just happened in a matter of hours. What's going to happen in the spring when all of this record snow melts and the dams start spilling over and breaking? Even these recent volcanoes this year, Shishald in Alaska, a VEI-3 eruption raised to code red, Sabancaya, New Zealand, a VEI-4, Popocatépetl, Mexico, VEI-4, or even Taal, Philippines, the VEI-5 that everyone is freaking out about, spewing particulates 9 to 15 kilometers into the atmosphere. These are little piddly drops in the bucket compared to what's coming. It is historical record that major VEI 7 and 8 super eruptions go off during these grand solar minimums, going up to 100 kilometers into the atmosphere, adding ungodly amounts of aerosols and particulates for even more heavy rain cloud seeding, sometimes blocking out the sun for years. Now, I can't speak for NOAA, but after a few years of weather like this in your country, I don't think you need the voice of God to tell you you're probably going to need a boat. But rain fell on Oahu, Hawaii for 247 days and nights from 1993 to 1994. 200 days more than Noah's or the many indigenous stories, and the world didn't flood then, there is a huge volume difference between dense monsoon rains and normal seasonal rain, but there is another component that we are missing. We still need to account for the sinking of massive land masses such as Friesland, Palau, and California, as we discussed in this film, as well as the desolation of mountain ranges and the freak electrical phenomenon we described earlier as Lichtenberg patterns and the Son of Man. As it turns out, these events are interrelated with each other and have everything to do with the ether, the composition of atmospheric gases and pressure, compression and decompression cycles, plasma, dielectricity, magnetism, and even the appearance of so-called comets and meteorites. On a side note, our own personal useless opinion after researching this film is that there is no worldwide catastrophe in one day that floods and burns the entire Earth. There are billions of thriving species today and ancient ruins that shouldn't be there. Food doesn't grow above the tree lines, and these survivors had to eat something when they found dry shores. There are too many illogical problems with that scenario to cover in this short film, though we will discuss the mechanics of a few theories out there that contradict our own opinion. But depending on your experiential worldview at the time, there most definitely were and will be countries and places on this planet that have end-of-the-world events, for those unfortunate enough to be living in those areas when these events happen.
When we talk about the sun connected to the Earth, and I showed you those images of all the interconnected magnetic field lines, etc., I'm just going to make it real super simple and say positive charge and negative charge, like your battery, plus minus. And over the last 400 years, the Earth and the sun have had a chance to equalize their electrical inflows to each other, magnetically, electrically. So the sun is quickly stepping down. If it's going to step down in its state and we're still highly charged, where's that electrical field going to go to? It needs to discharge somehow. It's called the global electric circuit. And this is what governments are piggybacking on right here. They know the atmosphere is going to become highly charged on a natural cycle. So what they're going to try to do is ride in on, geoengineering and the delivery of beaming electricity from space. 25 years ago was undoable, not because of the tech, because of the atmosphere not being highly enough charged to deliver that. Now, bringing back to the effects that we should see, and again, we should be seeing things if it's truly in play. So here we go. Things that were considered incredibly rare, like never ever seen, so much that when you would see it or capture it on film once, it would make front page news because it was that rare. Here we got blue auroral jets, common now. This is an electrical discharge up into one of the magnetic field lines coming down from the sun. So our electrical field is actually trying to charge back up and connect to the sun.
Does this look like it's trying to connect to a sun 93 million miles away? Then why does it stop so quickly?
Red sprites. Once unheard of, even things of myth and legend. And here we are, now they're common. Almost every electrical storm across the planet is showing these red sprites now. And then we have these, where does lightning usually discharge to? Yeah, it goes from the ground down. Well, now we're getting upward lightning coming off the Earth. Well, this is, again, it's an equalizing charge. That overcharge is trying to jump out and do something.
Does your light socket try to power a building in India? No, it's a closed circuit.
Trying to reconnect with the field lines. So we're starting to see this thing, and I highly encourage you to look this up. It's called the global electric circuit, and it explains how the ionosphere is being highly charged on a natural cycle. So we get incredible weather storms and so many electrical effects of things that are driven by the motion of this electromagnetism.